Welcome to the Uber Mention podcast. Our mission is to provide content which fosters the expanding human consciousness in order to make us our individual and collective best selves. If you appreciate our show, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. And please leave a comment below. Without further ado, I give you the Uber Mention. Welcome to this week's show. This week is going to be a big, juicy one. It's just going to be Clayton and I today, but we're discussing something that is inevitably will trigger certain people. It will inevitably bring about maybe even emotions. I don't know, strong feelings, definitely opinions. And so I'm going to begin by saying our topic tonight is dogma and duality, and essentially the BS belief systems that make up all of what ails most of us. And so please understand that, at least for my own part, and I'll let Clayton say his part, that I am trying to come from as respectful of a place as I can. But I'm also going to speak matter-of-factly, and I'm not going to really mince my own personal opinions, and I'll certainly preface it with, this is my opinion. But we're going to get kind of into some nitty-gritty. It might even be a two-part episode. I'm not sure. We're just going to kind of wrap and see where it goes and how long it all takes to do it. But that being said, I know Clayton has a few things that he would like to say in terms of prefacing, the topic, and then we're going to kind of get right into it. So Clayton, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can go right ahead.
Yes, yeah. To corroborate what you were saying as well is wanting to approach this and all things from a place of respect and a place of inclusion. Certainly not to add another splinter, another source of divisiveness in this already very divisive space, Earth space, time that we seem to find ourselves in some ways, and in other ways not. And with that too, again, it's all BS. This is my BS. These are my belief systems, and Jeremy, you and I had talked yesterday. I had called you kind of with some, how do I put it? Not apprehensions, but admittedly insecurities on my part, where with many things in my life, I just don't feel like an authority on the subject, for lack of a better word. I'm trying to think of a better word for the authority on the subject.
Right.
However, nevertheless, in the spirit of authenticity, I feel the need to share it anyway, and also want to couple in how it may help people along their journey, because as uncomfortable as delving into dissecting and building upon dogma and duality, how uncomfortable that can be when we get into belief systems and hit nerves, for me, it's been helpful not to avoid the subject or to avoid pain in my life, but to dive right in and get to the root of the matter and let it pass through me.
Yeah, I want to add to, this is from my own personal experience, right? So whenever you get triggered, that emotion wells up, and then you start to maybe have a reaction or some sort of thing that you feel like you must project, and that's exactly what it is. If you're judging any of what we're about to say, it's like a 99% chance that that's a projection. And so just take it in, try to hear it. You don't have to agree. This is really our own interpretation of what we have found to be true in our own journey. And I'd actually wanted to do a diagram, but I can do it with my hands, right? So truth, capital T truth, is this infinitely running line, right? And it's unwavering, it's unchanging. That is truth. That's to me the immutable law or the immutable one law of nature. is what truth is. And as individuals, as we are seeking truth, depending upon the frequency that we're vibrating at, if we're at a higher frequency, the wave is tight. And as it crosses that line and we intersect the line of truth more frequently than if we're a low frequency, and that line might only, hit the wave may only cross the line a couple times in our lives. So I think that as you cross the line more and more of truth with a higher frequency, you start to be able to discern what that capital T truth is, and you feel it. You feel it in your gut, you feel it in your heart, you recognize it in your mind, and you start to align with it. And unfortunately, when the more you intersect that line, the more painful the process is, because it really strips bare a lot of the things that we define ourselves by. And that's that's a great lead into what specifically we are going to call, what is this duality that we're speaking about? What is your own personal definition of it, Clayton?
My own personal definition. Well, I was about to read off of the definition that I had pulled up, which is, and I'll pull that up in a moment. But I would say that duality is, at least in this third dimensional space, is perhaps the perception of at least two different aspects of the same thing. But I know that you and I both try to operate from the understanding of all is one. All is one at the highest level. Yet here in this third density, one is also many. But it's all aspects of the one. That would be my overarching definition of duality. As opposed to when I was looking through some definitions of it as two opposing forces. And I think I did find a definition here. The definition is from Oxford Languages. If you were just to go to dictionary.com, the quality or condition of being dual. Or two, I like this one, an instance of opposition or contrast between two concepts or two aspects of something. A dualism, but two aspects of something.
A great example of that would be temperature, right? We often would say hot and cold are opposites, but in reality, they're just higher or lower frequencies of the same thing, right?
Spectrum.
That's right. Just a different end of the spectrum of the same thing we call temperature. And I would argue that that's true of just about everything we could call opposites. Like that lends into the 7 Hermetic principles, which I'll do a screen share and show those when we get to that, if you'd like, or we could do it now, because those 7 principles, when I speak about this capital T truth, for me, the 7 principles, these 7 Hermetic principles, kind of outline all of it, and they're found in every single holy book, in every single text that anyone would subscribe to from a dogmatic direction. These 7 principles are in it. And so to me, it's like one of those things that as you see it over and over and over again, well, there's something to it, right? And these, what is known as the 7 Hermetic principles, were outlined in a book called the Kybalion. And the Kybalion is sort of like it's like a Bible. I wouldn't call it the Bible. It is a holy book, but it came from the land of Kemet, which was ancient Egypt. And I'll just share my screen here real quick and show you the Wikipedia definition anyway of the what this Kybalion is. This is the book with the 7 Hermetic principles are right here. The principle of mentalism, the all is mind, the universe is mental. The principle of correspondence, it's also known as above and so below. The principle of vibration, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. And this is exactly what Clayton and I were talking about, the principle of polarity. Everything is dual. It has poles. It has its pair of opposites, like and unlike. They're the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. That's one that takes a little bit of chewing on to really, I think, wrap your head around. 5 is the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. Pendulum swing manifests in everything. This leads to the idea of duality that we're going to expand upon. 6, the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect, and every effect has its cause. We could call that principle karma and dharma. Not that karma is a punishment, but rather just it's an effect or a cause. The 7 is the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles, and gender manifests on all planes. If you would like to see more of that, I would highly recommend that we look into the Kabbalion. It's a great book. It's not very long. But everything that's in that book you have heard in the Bible, you have heard in the Bhagavad Gita, you've heard in Taoism. It's all, there's nothing new under the sun, as they say. So I would urge anyone who's on a journey of spiritual development or expansion to look into that book, because it definitely carries over into the arena of law as well. Because words matter, right? We have talked about this in our previous shows. Words and the words that we choose actually matter. So
Words are worlds. There's a reason why words are within worlds and worlds are within words.
that's right. Yeah, that's well said. So I think the first thing that's the most obvious that we can sort of dive off into before we really get into the heavy, it's very easy to look around the world right now and see very contrasting examples of duality, right? Whether it's the political thing, the red and the blue, the Republican Democrat game that we want to play, which one could say that's the world's most dysfunctional family, right? Because the Democratic angle is the feminine angle and the conservative angle is the masculine angle. But never are they trying to come together and act as a family unit, are they? It's more like, no, mommy's in control, no, daddy's in control, and like daddy's a horrible human or mommy's a poor or whatever, whatever we want to go down that road. But that's the political game. That's the pendulum, right? Isn't it it's swung about as far left, at least in our country, as I've ever seen. And I can't help but wonder, is the change that feels like it's underfoot going to swing that pendulum as far to the right as we've gone left? Time's going to tell, right? We're going to see. But part of how that duality, how we transcend that duality and start turning it into something other than outsourcing to some figure that's going to save us, or to some entity that knows better how to make decisions for us in the case of politics. We must first realize that all of what is external begins here, internal. And, the journey inside manifests the journey outside. And that one took a long time for me to really wrap my head around, first of all, and then actually check my ego enough to start looking for it, and then not looking for it, but then seeing that it was undeniable. And so what I say now is I can't disprove that we manifest our own reality, that we're co-creators of our reality. I cannot disprove that, and I have actively sought to. In fact, I would say that in trying to do that, I'm either victim of a whole lot of crazy coincidences over and over and over again, or I have a hand in shaping my reality. And I know you feel the same or similar, on this matter.
I do. I too cannot disprove what we are now calling the law of attraction, what maybe they used to call the law of correspondence. Words are worlds.
Spells.
We create with our thoughts, with our sigils, our symbols, our images, first internally, and then the external representation before it even leaves the tip of our tongue, before it parts from our lips. We are creating all the time. It's a beautiful thing. It's also in the respect of duality, is also a potentially terrible thing. When we are creating from a place of subconscious programming, which it seems to me that most people, and a lot of the time, admittedly, myself, am running on these subconscious programs that have been delivered upon us, by external and internal forces.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The programming is probably, well, that's what mostly triggers us, is the program. And I'll give you a perfect example, right? How about, I am a straight white Christian Republican. I just put myself in a whole series of boxes that may not actually represent me, honestly, right? And in doing that and wearing those labels, and let's face it, this world, today's world, is all about as many different labels as we can wear, and it's heralded as diversity, right, or inclusivity, or any of the virtue signaling phraseology that is so associated with the current mind virus, that affects a good deal of the population. um, the more of those labels that we seek to wear, the more separation occurs, the more layers of illusion we have to try and peer through if we're actually going to figure out who the fuck are we, to borrow from Jay Griff. Who are we? Who is just Jeremy? Am I the one that's thinking all of these thoughts? Am I the one that has all these big ideas? Am I a mother, or am I a father, or am I a husband? I'm all those things. I'm all of those things. But ultimately, who just Jeremy really is the watcher, the one that's observing the thoughts, observing the husband, observing the father, so on and so forth. That is a concept that took me really up until the past 6 months, man, to really embrace. And that came from the book, The Untethered Soul. Fat man, I could not recommend a book stronger. I was definitely not ready to read that, maybe say 5 years ago. A lot of it would have went over my head. But as we have sort of started untangling all of the threads that, are, or is, the person that we call ourself, who this self is, and all the different aspects of self, man, it can, I think everyone is a little bit split personality at minimum, right? There's probably a lot more than one or two going on in most people's life. I don't know about you, but I'm speaking for me. There's a lot.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in there.
Yeah.
It's refreshing, freeing, and challenging all at once to observe and to own the idea that I am not any of those things in particular. Though taking ownership, I am all of those things, or rather made up of all of those things, if you will. But at the end of the day, even now as I'm speaking, as I'm thinking, there is a seat of consciousness in there watching it all.
That's right.
So how is that? So who the fuck are we? Who the fuck am I?
Right.
A great question to ponder. More of a rhetorical one, if you will.
That's right. I think that's sort of the journey of life. The journey of life is finding the continually expanding answer of that question, right? Because it seems to continually expand and iterate more as we become more aware of ourselves and these various aspects. But to circle it kind of back to where we're going with this is this notion of duality. And we can't deny that there are poles, right? With light and dark, positive, negative, all the very obvious ones. But right now, there's this really big theme in the general consciousness of good versus evil, right? That we are in a spiritual war. And I 100% agree that we are in a spiritual war. Is it, however, good versus evil, God versus the devil, or some other entity? From the Christian side of things, I'm just going to say God versus the devil, right? Or the light versus the dark. But for me, and this came from the law of one material, the raw material, that my wife and I discovered, man, I don't know, 15 or more years ago. And we would sit down and read it together. And it's, if you have not heard of or read the law of one, I do believe that it's available in an audiobook format because it's kind of a difficult read, but it's channeled material. So you can take it with however you feel about that is whatever. But when I say channeled, I mean literally it was delivered from a psychic. And the material that the psychic delivered, well, you judge it. You read it yourself and you come to your own conclusions. So I cannot possibly come to the conclusion that it was made up, that this individual or even the group who put on the whole thing, which coincidentally had when they said about doing what they were doing, it had nothing to do with contacting some foreign or alien consciousness, whatever you want to call it, interdimensional being. I don't know. It claims that it is Ra from Egypt, the same Ra from, the Ra El, Israel, the same El from, or Ra from the biblical times, that's right, the same entity. But it is overwhelmingly positive. The information that Ra delivers is insanely deep and far more expanded upon than any of our areas of science or other basic mainstream arenas of understanding. But the whole principle or the whole purpose of the law of one material is to expand upon the law of one, that all is God. God is the all. There's no other way to put it. Like God equals everything. So if that is my base understanding, that God equals everything, then there cannot be a separation. There is no devil that is separate from God. That means that this devil, and we're going to get into what the devil could be or means or any of those things. This devil character that is often portrayed as God's not equal, but in many ways opposer, right? And I know that a lot of Christians say, well, Satan can't create anything; he can only pervert that which has been created. I would agree with that. Actually, I would agree very strongly that that's the case, because again, there is only one creator if you take it all the way back, right? And there's a reason that the symbol of infinity is the symbol for God, because no matter how far left or right you go, you always end up coming back to the point of creation and then back out again and in again and out again, just like the seasons that we see or the tide that rises or the breath that we take, right? It's all evident everywhere in nature. If we can just strip away our belief systems and actually observe, things may start to open up a little bit. But do you want to expand your thoughts on this good and evil narrative that's being portrayed?
I think you did. I think you did so very well in that. Again, if God is all, and if we were to take it from I'm going to use the word traditional in our sense here as Americans traditional, Christianity is the overarching tradition, that acknowledging that God created everything, including the devil, and if we were all thought childrens of it, how could there be this separation? How could it be God versus God? And in a way, it is. It's I against I,
Yes.
day in, day out,
Yes.
moment to moment, right?
I against me. That's the one that I find. It's like it's I against me, because me is different than I. I know that sounds kind of crazy, and it may like be like kind of a mind fuck for people, but really, I is different than me, and that's something that has taken me again some chewing on to really start to understand. Me is ego for personally. That's who me is. Me is this false perception, the separated entity that I or that is called Jeremy. I mean, it's even kind of screwy to say because the language for it is, it sounds funny saying I and me talking about the same sort of self, right? It's a convoluted, uh, murky water to wade into to begin with.
Yes, perhaps we will, maybe one day we'll do an episode on etymology, which is the roots of the words that we use. And what I was thinking about just came back to me for the God versus the devil thing. Let's look at our words. Let's look at a word like evil. What is evil backwards? To live.
Yeah.
Live in reverse, maybe, perhaps. What is devil backwards? Lived. What is love backwards? Evil. We're going to define the word dogma here soon when we get to that. Let's look at the word dogma. What is dogma backwards? Am God.
Interesting. Now that one I didn't even think about. And so again, I mean, that may not be very profound to anyone, but I don't accept coincidence as a factor of life anymore. Everything has meaning, and it drives my kids crazy sometimes because my middle daughter is always like, you always have to take something to the. It's always deeper. It's always deeper. And I'm like, yes, because it is. Because often concepts that are so often thrown around are misunderstood because there is deeper meaning to them, and we have gotten so shallow as a collective now, and removed, I think, from the roots of what being human really means. And again, that might be a whole other show in of itself to get off into that. But for me, dogma, and this is not the Webster's definition of the word, but dogma is a concept or a system, a framework that has been given to you by man that is rooted in tradition. That is rooted in doing things a certain way to get a pretty consistent result. And that may not, I'd like to I should look up the definition of dogma.
Well, we have it here as at least one definition: a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true.
Well, that certainly expands upon my own broad strokes view of it. Yeah.
A definitive authoritative tenet.
Ah, yes.
Definitive authoritative. Not really leaving room for questioning or expansion or integration.
That's right. Sounds like a pretty good place for coercion to occur. Yeah. Because what is an authority mean to you? Is it someone that you outsource your ability to come to truth on? Because the Bible is riddled with passages stating, seek and you shall find. You want the truth, then you need to go look for it. That's how we expand. That's how we become. That's how we turn a belief into knowing, right? Or as Robert Monroe would have said, turning as many unknowns into knowns as possible. And I have learned the hardest of ways that every time I outsource my ability to come to a conclusion, whoever gives me the answer or the direction never has my best interests at heart. It's never about my own personal expansion. And even in the instances where that is the claimed mission, it doesn't always, well, rarely does it seem to play out that way. And maybe that's a flaw of human nature. I don't know. But to say that human nature is flawed is to say that God is flawed, right? And because all is one. So I don't believe that that's the case. I think everything is perfect. In all of our flaws, there lies perfection. Because it's through all of these flaws that we're able to even get to the point where we're having a conversation about this sort of stuff right here and right now. So I think one could make a pretty decent argument that, where we're going is whatever humanity is an evolution of consciousness. It's something that God did with deliberate intent. And that's why it's also possible to look back through history and see things sort of repeat over and over again. I like to say history doesn't repeat, it rhymes, because it doesn't give you the exact same results over and over, but boy, does it give you similar ones. And the same kinds of events in scale, bigger or more obvious. And that is a pattern that's occurred in my own life, right? If I say I want abundance, well, I get abundance, but boy, I get it in the least likely of ways. It might be an abundance of bills. It might be an abundance of broken down, things to fix, or whatever, because I'm not as careful with my words as maybe I should be, right? And so abundance is the model. And I would state that where we get off into the weeds in this thing we're talking about here, duality, is when we adopt the idea that there isn't enough to go around, that resources are limited, that love is limited, that anything we can come up with is limited. It's only limited if it's been manufactured, right? And that's a limitation of man. That's not a limitation of God. Because I've said this many times, you go out into nature, limitation or scarcity is not actually the model. It may be in specific eco areas, but overall there is no lack in our natural world. There's no lack of, you look up at the night sky, is there a lack of stars? Is there a lack of other things going on outside of us, above our heads? No, it's infinite as far as you can see. And that model carries over and over again. So if you're looking at your worldview, if it begins in the notion that it's survival of the fittest, it's the law of the jungle, it's a kill or be killed, man, that is a sucky place to start from. And that's where I know that's where I started from. And I'm not going to speak for you, but I'm pretty sure you started from a very similar place. That's the model our civilized society is built upon.
Yeah, the illusion of scarcity is the man-made model that has been placed upon us like shackles. Where Source's world, as you said, an infinite abundance of stars. You used the example once of a tree producing more acorns than a squirrel could ever store, more than will ever fruit. I am choosing to believe that in God's world, nature's world, there is not lack. And if we perceive lack, it's because we perceive lack in ourselves, again. But I know we are operating from the standpoint that all is self, that we are co-creators here, that it starts in here and then takes outward form, and definitely requires action. But I won't. We could get into the law of attraction and maybe the better ways to use it some other time. Yeah, lack is an illusion. all physicality is an illusion. This is really heady stuff. I know that. I know this is not simple things. This last night too, when I called you and wanted to go over here how I was going to do, how we wanted to deliver this, I was thinking along the lines of just wanting to make things not concrete or bulletproof, because that feels like dogma, but still of carrying more weight where I am better able to articulate. And I find myself having trouble being able to do so tonight with these heady concepts. But with all that being said, too, I want to get to the place too where I could just speak freely without having to prove something, or slow down on every single topic to make these things seem of sound reason. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense to me. Man, it is. It's such a difficult thing, and it almost sounds like egotistical to even entertain. Like, I'm going to tell you about duality. Let me give you the lowdown on religion and politics because I haven't figured out. Like, no, I'll tell you what I figured out, that I don't know shit. And until I know who the fuck I am, like, really, who am I? Until I know that, then I'm not really qualified to have strong opinions or strong beliefs on much of anything. And I know that almost sounds like I'm disempowered. It's actually the most empowering thing I've ever done. It's one of the most empowering concepts that I've ever realized. It's like, I don't have all the answers. I don't have it figured out. Here's one thing I do know, though. I am not afraid of death, because death that's not a real thing, right? I wouldn't know because I haven't died. But what I mean is, does this avatar that I'm, animating right now, this I, the watcher that is behind the thoughts and behind all the things that me is taking in, the watcher doesn't die. I would call that our soul, right? So while this avatar ages and this avatar leaves this three-dimensional space at some point that we call time, the energy that animates this thing goes on, because energy can never be destroyed, because it was created nor destroyed, if you believe, in physics. And I do. I'm not. That's the funny thing, is that the deeper down this hole you go, the more you see how everything ties together. I love quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics, more and more and more, quantum physics is the almost like explaining from the scientific side of things how God works, how God created this thing that we call the universe, or whatever you want to call it, creation, wherever angle you're coming from. That's kind of like my own broad understanding of the game, that we're playing. But if you're not coming from a place of fear of death, because there's no scarcity, and because you don't really die anyway, that really opens your heart and your mind to so many possibilities and so much expansion. And as long as I continue, and I try to remind myself, and kids are good for this, right? Because every time you might start to think that you have some shit figured out, your kid will like throw a question out there at you. And it usually comes from the youngest ones, right? It's always a little kid that asks you something that you're like, whoa, how do I approach this? What do I say here? And because they're honest, they're unfiltered, and their perception, we can learn so much from kids, and having the opportunity to homeschool our children has taught me that we don't really teach a kid anything. We provide an opportunity for them to expand on something that they want to be a part of. Like, I didn't teach my kid to read. She decided that she wanted to be a part of the reading club, and then she started doing the things that led her to, the ability to reading. So I don't take credit for that, because, like, we may have gone over phonics and I may have provided materials. I couldn't have ever made her read if she didn't want to, and that's, I kind of apply that same ideology to myself. It's if I'm open, then I'm going to get the answers. If I'm, seeking, then the truth will come to me. It rarely comes in the way that I want it or in the ways that I expect it. And the message almost always is like, really? Really? That's how we're gonna go with this, man? Like, God, how do I okay, okay. The universe is God has a sense of humor. I don't care,
Absolutely.
God has got a great sense of humor.
Creator loves irony.
Oh gosh.
And so do
Everywhere.
I. It plays into duality. Once you got this over here, well, let's introduce a little bit of this. Us polarized people, then we're like, okay, that wasn't really working. I better go over here. And then, well, you've been over here long enough, son. Why don't you come back over here? This
That's
back
right.
and forth, back and forth. For a long time, I thought that spirituality and the point of it all, enlightenment, was to achieve balance. Well, that is absolutely true. It is to achieve balance and integration. But what I'm beginning to understand more and more is that balance is not a state that we are going to exist in, at least here all the time, or I don't believe that we would be here. I believe it is to dance between the poles and to integrate them and to own all of those aspects, all of those things going on within us. It's a state of flux. And to expect one to be this peaceful, balanced person that is not rocked at all by the waves of life is it's uncompassionate and it's unrealistic. And I think we do that to ourselves all the time, even maybe not if we're people with more spiritual presets like we are, even if we're just regular average Joe's base people, or even if you're strictly in science, consider yourself to be an atheist. That this inner critic expects you to be perfect all the time, and to me, more and more, perfection is not a noun. It's not a destination. Perfection is a verb. It is a journey. Balance is a journey, and balance is a verb, not a noun. Again,
Yes.
if things were to be still all the time, that would be stagnant. What happens in stagnant pools of water? Not much good. Good.
Yeah, and again, so back to the notion of words, and so often we're given a good guy or a bad guy, or the positive or the negative. But is life ever that simple? I as a bit of a history person, the more I go back through history, and again, I don't know, I wasn't there. That's what I know. I know that I wasn't there, but I try to, in certain events, I try to get to the people who were there to tell their side of it. And what always comes to the top, it doesn't matter if you're talking about Hitler or I don't know, any other super polarizing figure that you can think of that comes to mind. It's never as simple as good or evil, or good or bad, or right or wrong. That's not the human experience. It's all about the nuance. It's all of that gray area in between the two extremes is where life happens. And because so few of us, and I'm gonna make a statement that sounds judgy, but just understand that I'm really talking to me. I am talking to me. Does that catch on to that, right? So it's very easy for us to say, I am a good person. I am a loving person. Without, in saying that, we tend to omit the times of the day, because I am sometimes a very loving person, and at other times I'm a selfish ass. Okay. And it can happen in the matter of minutes, sometimes even seconds, depending upon, the circumstances. But the point is, I have the capacity to be good or bad. I have it. And if I'm not constantly checking myself and being aware of that nuance in between, I start to come up with a narrative about me that is not actually accurate, right? I am a good, loving person. Well, am I? sometimes, and this takes it all back. And so it's about the dance. And so again, if for me, I think I become closer to the authentic version of myself when I am not trying to put labels on myself. I'm not saying I am a straight white Christian American Republican, because even a person who is rigid to every one of those ideologies, I could give you multiple examples of how you might not be, right? And we could look at today's political race and see the horrific irony, right? So the conservative party's leader is this Trump character who's been married and divorced how many times, uh, probably had relations with a porn star, is definitely not a, like, worked with the mob in New York to get things done. I mean, he's the reality TV star, all these things, right? And then we have the party of democracy, which is supposed to be rule of the people, but then we won't even get off into that weeds, right? But the party of the people just took the people's choice and ran him out of office for somebody else. So it's just horribly ironic that these labels, that the creed that these institutions allege to live by, couldn't be any further from the actual truth in practice, right? And I think that's what happens when we're further away. When I talked about that line that is capital T truth in the beginning of this, when we're further away from that line, that's when we start getting these ridiculous things in reality, right? Where the two choices that we have to pick from are, these like characters that embody almost the opposite characteristics that one would say is a conservative valued individual or a liberally valued individual. That's not the world that we live in. And the same thing could be said about good and evil, right? Because we need not look any further than our religious institutions. And while I can only speak from a Christian perspective, I've done plenty of study into other religions, and there isn't another religion that could sit on any high horse and say, yes, well, the Christians, yeah, they're all corrupt, but we Muslims or we Jews or we Hindus or insert any other, brand that you want. Nobody can say with any authority that they're any less corrupted or corruptible than any other entity, right? And that's what leads us into these places of division and infighting and separation, which always leaves us feeling depressed or lack. And so, and I'm learning, if I feel that, then I'm further away from truth. I need to be going back in another direction if I want to experience that capital T truth.
Yeah, turning it back inward, and it's duality is really just, this is a perfect subject because the constant flip that happens all the time, politically. I'm sure many of you, our listeners, if you're tuned in already, kind of understand the politic du jour, this red blue thing, as two wings, same bird, same direction. Same direction as far as this controlled opposition and narrative seems to be playing out, at least to me, at least from what I have seen, as the powers that were, as I'm choosing to call them now, are master psychologists, understand duality and the multitude of energies and seemingly oppositions going within us all the time, and play the good cop, bad cop, and switch sides like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to them. They act like they can't that they hate each other on TV. And when the cameras are off, the ones making deals.
That's right.
And directing, trying to direct our collective future.
Well, politicians,
they are organized in a way that we are not.
Politicians are always directing us to play the commerce game, right? Is Trump standing up there and saying, hey, man, look, do you understand that being a U.S. citizen means that you gave up your God-given inalienable rights for government-granted privileges and benefits? Are you cool with that? Because that's why the U.S. Federal Reserve has the power that it has. That's why you pay taxes. That's why you have a driver's license, so on and so forth, as we've done 2 episodes on this material already. But is Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or RFK Jr. or any of these people who claim to want to lead you in a more free, back to making something great again direction, are they trying to actually free you from the game that is commerce? No, they're not. So when you say 2 wings of the same bird flying us in the same place, that's exactly what you mean. That it's continuing the game we call commerce. And if you really want to get into duality, boy, go down that rabbit hole. Because commerce is quite literally taking creation and inverting every aspect of it and flipping it upside down. Taking the law of the land and turning it into the law of the water, right? Taking the water and turning it into the land. Swapping everything that was God's creation, making us cattle, quite literally, like chattel as they refer to it. And we do it willingly. So that doesn't, and the reason for that, y'all, is, if you go back to the 7 Hermetic principles, because they understand that every cause has an effect. And in this way, it's a clever way to mitigate karma, right? They didn't take anyone's free will. We're giving it. And not only will we give it, but we might fight somebody who says otherwise. We might fight them to the death. In fact, many wars have been waged over said things. I mean, think about things like the Crusade or any religious war. Or look at, what's going on in the Middle East these days. What is the real root cause of the issues, right? It can be taken down to dogma. And while I know that it's an uncomfortable topic because it's very triggering and it spurs a lot of very strong feelings. And so we may as well just get into this religion. The specific dogma that we're talking about are religions, right? And we shared in our first episode, which got scrubbed from YouTube, but you can find it on Rumble or Spotify. We shared our own where we are in our own journeys of religion, and we all came out of Christian upbringings. And now I would very much call myself I am a follower of, I try very hard to follow the teachings of Jesus. And when I say the teachings of Jesus, I mean the red words that were in the Bible. And even that is opens because Jesus spoke in parables. So, it's kind of up to you to figure out. But I think if you seek, you will find. And I think that Jesus was very clear in what he was trying to get from, or get us to go towards. That if we wanted to find the kingdom of heaven, that we would look within. Well, that's pretty clear that you got to go inward. And there's even specific passages, which I should have had the exact passage with me, but I don't. But there are passages that discuss the pineal, like the pineal gland, this little part of your brain that science overlooks and basically says is it's a throwback from the era of our evolution. I would argue that it's the gateway to connecting with consciousness, with God, with something much bigger than yourself. And it happens through things like psychedelic experiences and meditation and breath work, things like that. That is how, you light up the pineal gland. But I don't want to steer too far off. I want to get back to this thing that we are calling religion. And right now, most of the people that I know who have strong opinions about another religion, it doesn't come from a place of actual knowledge. It comes from a place of ignorance. And anytime someone makes an absolute statement like, "Oh, Muslims are just murderous," or well, Hindus, it's too much woo woo. They're all woo woo. Or Christians, they're all pacifists. Uh, Anytime you hear a absolute statement, you can pretty much know that that is not capital T truth, right? And so these religions are often, well, not often, they are fighting for who has the right version of God. And almost none of them take the time to read each other's books, because if they did, like Gandhi or any of the other great, sages or great teachers of our era, Jesus, I would argue that that's what Jesus was doing in his time in the wilderness. I would argue that Jesus was, in the East, becoming a very good Buddhist, because the Jesus parables sound a whole lot more like a Zen monk than they do a Christian mystic. But that's
Yeah,
just
it seems to me that at points throughout history that what you and I might call an avatar, the embodiment of the Christ principle, that this figure that we're calling Jesus, maybe closer to the name was Yeshua. I mean, Jesus doesn't even seem close to the name at all. Again, words are a funny thing. When we say Jesus, we're saying "Hey Zeus," right? Hey Zeus, right? That Now the roots of Hinduism in the Vedic scriptures really just touch upon the same truths as the truths that Jesus talked about. Jesus, Jesus, Yeshua, whatever. We'll say Jesus for. I'm not going to get into the semantics.
Right. That's
Keeping
a whole
it
series
simple.
of rabbit holes.
Yeah, the Vedic scriptures were a presentation of the principles that govern our reality, and understanding the inner self. Then it broke off into these many different deities, which I believe are archetypes or aspects of the multitude of diverse energies that are occurring within one's being in one's space anyway. And a lot of people assume that same thing with the American Indians, that they worshipped all these gods. Yet they had the word Great Spirit. They had these different things people would call it deities, or represent. What I believe, again, were representations. Then where maybe the dogma was introduced among the Vedic people, which I believe we'll get into one day. These insidious high priests that spread throughout the continents, corrupting people and getting in the way of their direct commune with Source, with Creator and creation itself, is where we started to see the worship, very similar to the word worship as well, the worship of all these deities. So perhaps someone like Buddha, who saw this class system going on, and all these multitude of gods, whose message was bringing the aspect of the void, where there is many, but there is one, and the roots of it, and to sum up Buddhism being the void, the space of potential all creation. Like maybe the center of the atom is what I kind of picture, which, again, interestingly enough, if you look at what we depict as an atom in a two-dimensional space, the center of it is the Star of David.
Yes.
And so then where I think Buddhism was missteered, where the void, nothingness, is an aspect of everything, but then comes perhaps an insidious teaching, dogma, sending people down a nihilistic path. All is nothing. All is devoid of nothing. We aren't even really here. In a high enough aspect, perhaps we aren't really here, if all is an illusion, and matter takes form by being observed. I mean, the double slit experiment gets referenced a lot and tries to be debunked a lot, and whatever. Look into that yourself, what the double split experiment is. However, to say that we're not even really here just seems like very much bypassing to me too, because yet here I am. And that's the funny thing about duality too, where it's I have to counterbalance that. While there is, you and I are trying to get at the heart of balance and integration, these two seemingly opposing forces that all is one. When the New Age spiritual community says, no, there is no evil, it is all love and light. Look at your own life experience. When I look at mine, it is not all love and light. Not everybody is about all love and light. There are what we could call heinous acts that one could use the word evil. I want to think of better words, less divisive words, closer words. I really struggle with them. If you can't tell, it's hard for me to talk coherently, but this is the way that my mind works because I'm guarded against convenient absolutes like good or bad. But we cannot bypass this experience either. There is duality here, okay? So then we have Judaism occurring in a separate place too, which is very much, I believe, at the heart of the Hebrew teachings is closer to law. And I know that for a time you were reading the more so direct translations, right, of the Old Testament, where in the beginning we created the heavens and the earth.
Yes. There's a website called the Chronicle Project that is fantastic, man. It has, I think it's the entire Old Testament at this point now translated. And you would have to go to their website and see how they came to these translations and why it's the most accurate translation that we have to date of these texts. Fantastic stuff, though. But yes, it was in the beginning we created the heavens and the earth.
I had also heard that, again, and I'm fine with reading. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That makes a lot of sense to me, especially as we talk about the power of words, vibrations, creating, spiraling out into worlds or whirls, right? Yes. But also I had heard recently that a closer translation was, in the beginning was the law, and the law was God, and the law was with God. And now it seems, of course, in this world of duality, that law, as we understand it, is like the furthest thing from our concept of God or higher. It seems very much lower. Last night I was listening to a presentation as well, if we want to look just real quickly, look at the word law as it's been understood for a long time that law, the principles that govern reality, is land, air, and water. But maybe a hierarchy in that triangle where it's air or the divine breath.
Air would be the trusts. That would be the highest form. But yes, the acronym, land, air, water is.
Yeah, no, and finish that through. We've got air, the trust.
Yes, and then land. Yeah,
the trustee.
Well, no, law, air would be trust law, all things related to trust law. Land would be what we would consider like common law, which really is just it all boils down to the golden rule. And then water would be, that would be the law of merchants.
Maritime law. We have all these water words.
Yes.
Like our birth certificate, things we had talked about.
That's right.
Man's
law. Man's law.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Currency. But I digress. So I think like what I'm getting to is with all of these ancient traditions, if you will, these religions, I use that word purposely, religion, but these traditions or understandings attempting to use our feeble words to create a concept and understanding of this reality are inevitably sullied and bastardized by the powers that be at that point in time, to where what seemed like what could be a beautiful tradition or way of understanding through the Kabbalah and through ancient Hebrew and was presented, there was dogma underneath extalion, okay, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, which in a way, if we understand karma, is not too far off. But again, if we take the route of spiritual bypassing throughout all of that, it leads to a very uncompassionate, unforgiving, ungodlike presentation. So Jesus came to oppose that, if you will, with the idea of turn the other cheek, which I believe the insidious forces trickled in to create pervasive passivity and waiting for this supposed savior to come and deliver us from the evil that we created, or did our Father create? If Father created all, that God created good and bad in this battle of bad and sacrificed himself in a blood sacrifice to die on the cross for our sins, to save us from the sins that he created for us to experience anyway. You know, where I believe when I'm reading the text, what resonates with me is the idea of the embodiment of Christ, that I, capital I, am the light and the way. Rejoice, for the kingdom of heaven is in your heart. Not the man, not the flesh was the light and the way, the only way, which is which is what eventually I couldn't reconcile for good reason, as we talked about it again in our first episode, which was sadly stricken from YouTube, temporarily at least.
No, it's stricken.
Which was the ultimate deal breaker for me, because it was an ultimatum, and I finally decided I'm not going to come to know my Creator and life through an ultimatum, because that is a contract born upon fear. That means all the decisions that I'm making are from a place of fear, that I don't want to suffer eternal damnation. So therefore, I believe this.
That's right. Yeah.
And I understand it's more nuanced than that, too. I don't want to remove Christianity from the people that might need it at this point in time.
No.
But can we not see, though? Can we not see the bastardization of the divine concept? Does it not resonate truth within you that you are a child of God? We are a reflection of God here. Why would we need deliverance from anything? Why would we be given less? Like, I as a parent can understand that for my child, I don't want them to come to know me through do this or else, you know. And why would they have less? You know, I was taught, at least growing up as a Christian, if there's things you can't understand, you never will. And intellectual prowess is basically frowned upon, because that's the trick of the devil. That's where the devil comes in. It's very, very, just seemed like to me, convenient, closing the door on uncomfortable, perhaps, truths or aspects of truth so we don't explore. So I'll rest there.
No, that's a well said, like really well said. It's not as simple as all of these nuances would lead you to believe. And I personally think that for me, the best texts that I ever encountered that really like gave me a foundational understanding, that gave a missing part that all these other different spiritual teachings offered, was the Anastasia material. And we did talk about that. It's the Ringing Cedars series. We talked about that in the first episode. But it is so unique from any other spiritual text. And it delivers, in my opinion, what I think is the missing component, which is our connection to the land and our connection to creation. And yes, Clayton has the books up. And there are two different versions that are translated in English. One are those very nice artistic ones, and then another is the black covers. They're both great books. Really, the biggest difference is in the footnotes. And the footnotes of the books are really where the gems are in all of it. But the books, there's 10 or 11 of them. They're not very long, but I think it's from book 5 on, where she, like 5 to 7, where she really gets into the specifics of the priests and the way that
from co-creation.
Okay.
Anyway,
okay.
Doesn't matter.
But she lays out that essentially we're like 7 priests who, through their own understanding and spiritual expansion, were able to cheat the forgetting process that goes along with death. And every time that they reincarnated, they brought back with them all of their knowledge and experiences from their previous lifetimes. And in that way, they were able to play a game of chess on dimensions that, humanity couldn't really ever play. And the only reason that they did this was because they wanted a physical conversation with God. And that isn't how God works. And so they threw a fit, right? They were like, fine, then we're going to upend creation and we're going to force God into conversation.
Through divine, they're going to make things so tumultuous on the planet that there is but they in their minds leaving no choice but for God to come down and intervene. They were stubborn and petulant in their pursuit for higher knowledge, which rather than raising their vibration to meet God at this high, fast spinning frequency, expected creator to slow down. And as Anastasia will put it, that's be like expecting, like you want to be able to see the inner spoke of a bicycle, but what happens if the wheel stops spinning? Bike loses balance and falls over. Right. We have to move faster, think faster.
Well, I have considered, I never minimize the number of things, right, or the specific details. And there's 7 priests, 7 deadly sins, maybe like 7 aspects of human nature,
7 chakras, 7 continents.
right. So
7 seals, as they were in the Bible.
Yes. And so when she says priests, she specifically gets into the details of how the priests conquered her people. And her people were called the Vedrus. And the Vedrus people were, for lack of a better term, living in perfect harmony and balance with nature. And, again, you can choose to believe this as fact, or you can think of it as a work of fiction. And a lot like the Law of One, when you read it, the truth of it it hits you in such a way that it's like you may not be ready to hear it. Like I know I have shared the books with people who were like, they just couldn't get into it. And then a few years went by and they, maybe they read book 1 and they were like, man, this is really great stuff. And then it started them on the journey, it'll give to you when you're ready to receive. But I know every single time I've ever read any of those books, and I've read all of them except the second one, at least 3 times through. 4 through 7, I probably read 5 or 6 times through, because there's so much in there. And every time I go into it, it's like, whoa, how did I miss that? Or damn, I didn't think about it that way, and she tells everything in parables. Everything is in stories, very much like any other Avatar style teacher. And I do believe that this Anastasia entity was a real person, and for lack of a better term, was an avatar that was here to teach humanity. The things that she laid out in these books the first one was written in the mid 90s,
1996.
Okay, yeah. So she made some predictions, some pretty bold predictions, like about Russia and the future and things that would come to pass. And every single one of them has come to pass. And, so here we are. And again, you could say, oh, well, whatever. And unfortunately, the author of the books, like any interviews that you'll see with him, he doesn't do any help to the notion that, like, oh, you made all this shit up, or oh, you're just, you're a witch doctor, or whatever label or minimization you want to take to not discuss something that makes you uncomfortable, because those books will make you uncomfortable. There are many parts of those books that made me very uncomfortable, like with concepts that she introduced that took me years of chewing on to like come to a place where I could see her perspective as the most accurate. And so,
yeah, some of the most accurate I've found. Ironically, now as we are talking about this, which I'm sure you feel too, if we're play out the inner critic assumed opposition going in our minds, or thinking people could be looking at this like, oh, well, there's your dogma. You believe so much in this Anastasia character. Well, no,
I've been accused of it, actually.
Yeah, being in the cult of Anastasia or something like that. But it's there's no religion there when this person is telling you, I am not doing anything special here. I am but another child of God.
Yep.
One who's like chosen. You need no intermediaries. All of these supposed powers of prediction and matter manipulation is available in every one of God's children. And that's what I believe all of as we use the word avatar, or I use the word master, not from a master-slave relationship, but I trust you know what I mean.
Sure, someone who's mastered self-master.
A master of self and a master of this earth space was trying to teach us is that it's within all of us. Rejoice, the kingdom of heaven is in your heart, not somewhere else. Inside, and therefore outside too. That it's all here in grand abundance for us, God's children, and reflection,
Yeah. Well, so as we continue on this dive into religion, and for me, it's become so apparent that in order for humanity to truly become its fullest potential. And now here's the other thing, y'all. Let's be real. We don't know what a fully functioning human being is even capable of. As it's commonly understood, most of us, they say, are using roughly 20% of our brain power, right? What happens if we were using 80% of our brain power? What are we truly capable of? Well, we don't know. So we can't impose limits on what we think humanity is capable of, or when we say, well, human limitation. Well, we don't know what human limitation fully is because we haven't seen a fully realized human being. And we're trying to augment it with all kinds of technology and computing and weird, like marriages with technology, instead of actually doing the difficult work of figuring out what is retarding our ability to utilize all of our potential, not just a small amount of it. And I have to believe that it's things like religion, because it is a limiting belief system. It imposes a structure over you that encourages emotions in you which will never allow for you to expand, like guilt, like fear. Those two right there, if you could live a life less guilty and less fearful, man, what a better world we would live in. And that I don't really think that's up for debate. So if you could remove the chains, and those chains are all connected to very rigid structures that so many of us, even when you look back at the revolutionary period of this country, right, before there even was an America, there was a period of time where to suggest that people were anything other than English was like people couldn't even conceive of it. It was almost like blasphemous. You couldn't say that you were something other than British. You were British, but yet here we are. We're something completely other than, if you wanted to go down, the consistently held belief of history that we teach about this country. And religion is no different. To suggest that we could live in a world that is godly, because I know you've been asked this yourself, when people say, well, if you're not a Christian and you don't subscribe to religions, then you're an atheist. No, I'm not. I couldn't be further from an atheist. You'll never get an argument from me that God doesn't exist. Yes.
Oh, you meditate. You're Buddhist. Oh, you're New Age. Yes. Got it. Yes. Got it. Yeah, got you all figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that simple, huh?
Yeah, here's your box. Get in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so it's easy to sit here and say that religion needs to be, set aside. I mean, realistically, we might be hundreds of years from something like that. Or maybe it just takes an event that occurs that's so apparent, that makes it so obvious that religion is a problem that needs to be solved, right? And I don't know if it comes to that. I don't know. And again, if I know anything,
Yeah.
it's that I don't know, and I don't care to speculate on the future because that takes me out of the present. And then I'm just projecting. I'm projecting me instead of figuring out I. And
Yeah. And it's I know too it's hard when we see the problems inherent with anything or with anybody, if we observe friends who have a particular problem, to want to judge that thing as lesser than, or to want to judge people who, if they find themselves in various religious camps, or Christian or Buddhist or Muslim or anything that we've talked on, that we're coming from a place of higher than, and that they're lesser than, or though they have a that they have a problem, so they're wrong, I'm right, I'm righteous. And I know you, brother, well enough. I know that that's not where you're coming from or where we're coming from this, though. Sometimes we can't help but be perceived that way, especially when we hit a nerve of, oh, well, they're just arrogant fucks, that they know it all, they have it all figured out. No, we maintain here on the Uber Mention, we don't know shit other than what we've experienced, but that's not necessarily true. Spirit doesn't want me to say we don't know shit all the time either. What was I thinking about last night on my walk? I don't know shit, right? But I might know a thing or two. When we feel
a little bit about a little,
and we've experienced it. But I'll say with religion, where the respect must come in for everybody in this space, is we are all like orphans here, not knowing our parent, who is source, creator, God, Yahweh, Lord. Not so much my words, whatever we want to call it, right? We're orphans here who don't really know our parents. So we get very, very easily and excitedly hooked on when somebody comes along and tells us stories about our parents. I mean, just imagine what that would be like for someone who didn't know their parents. Well, I knew your parents, and your parents were like this. And we can also see, if we zoom out or dive in and really look in, of how dubious that can be too, if it's not coming from a place of speaking capital T truth, if they didn't actually know one's parents, how you can shape someone's whole trajectory from that point. So that is where for me, where the respect comes in, of not wanting to discount anybody's BS or their belief structures either. While I can still look at it and see, we're like, well, I think this would really help your life if you could let go of that fear, or that, that this idea or concept, especially the immediate ones that come to mind too, are especially the ones that come out of the Old Testament, where you have this Lord, who's our all-loving God, who has sacrifices on an altar, and the smell of the burning flesh was pleasing to the Lord, who ascribed values and numbers to women and slaves. I don't know. That doesn't sound like an all-loving parent to me.
No, man, it doesn't. It sure doesn't. And I've always contended, well, not always, but I would say in the last few years, I've contended, if there was a devil, and the devil really wanted to do something that was messed up, because the devil doesn't create anything, right? The devil distorts what creation is. I would come up with religion, and I would give it to the masses, and I would say, here is truth, depending upon where you are geographically located. And, I want to expand on this, because countries are no different, right? A country is a lot like a religion. It's a box that's been imposed upon you, that you've been given with all these traditions. And in the case of America, here we are, and I'm going through American history with my kids right now, so it's, I see all the parallels that go along with this conversation. But in the founding document, that all men are created equal, regardless of whether or not how the people who wrote that, in this country, it doesn't change the truth of it. And that's why I think, like, you can look at religion, and there are so much truth in the Bible. I've come back to the Bible in a lot of ways, and law was a big part of that. The person who really put me back to reading the Bible again was Jordan Peterson, believe it or not. And it was his lectures on the Old Testament that really just, like, I was like, whoa, man, I've got to go back through this. And then I wasn't a bitter, resentful, angry kid anymore. I was an honest seeker who was just really trying to find some more meaning in life. And there's, you could follow the laws of the Bible to the T and have a very, very amazing life. Or you could take it from the perspective of someone like Neville Goddard, who has a completely different way of translating the Bible, and get completely different results that are equally as fantastic and positive. Or you could scrap Neville Goddard and you could scrap the religious sages, and you could look at it from someone like William Donahue, who you can find on YouTube, who I would highly recommend to any seeker. But William Donahue's way of translating the Bible is completely different than a Neville Goddard, and completely different than the traditional way, or even a Jordan Peterson. And you can't deny the truth that comes out of it. So to me, it's a living document that gives the seeker that which they need and which they are actually seeking for. And I think it was geared towards, the Western minded individual. And that's why it landed, in our civilization. And that's why it continues to, and will for a very long time, have so much weight, in how we live. And I also will want to say that I know individuals who had their own literal come to Jesus moment and became really, really good people. But I have thoughts on why that's the case. I think that rather than finding within themselves their ability to transcend their own sins and their own weakness, they instead outsourced it to their Savior. And through their Savior, were they able to find the strength and to do the quote unquote right thing. Okay. So, I'm not going to discount that person's experience, or that
that may be exactly what they need at this point in time.
Right. And that's right.
I think ours is just to challenge people to transcend even that, externalizing our power and really understanding why we make the choices we make and the conclusions that we come to. Do we live a life motivated by love or fear? And it's both. I mean, fear and darkness too is a healthy thing. And know that I am not coming at it from this debased, twisted place of again, to use the word nihilism, where they want to say that there's no such thing as evil. There is no such thing as right or wrong. There is no morality. Bullshit, right? But understanding that fear can be a positive motivator, but it's not the only one. But it seems to me, at least, that when we're running on the subconscious program, what's been programmed innately within us by these very conscious forces, it's if we really look at life through that lens and ask ourselves, am I working the job that I like because I love what I'm doing, or am I afraid that if I'm not working the job that I work, that I lose everything? Do I love Jesus because of the positivity that it represents, or am I afraid that if I don't accept this, which my parents accepted and they've accepted most of my friends and everything, then I'll be going to hell? And how can one look at, like, let's say, like a Buddhist, then you'd have to give, then Christians would have to understand too that how could they possibly be going to hell when they love that character as much as you love your character? Why is that wrong, other than this text says that all others are incorrect, basically, right? That to me is what dogma is. And really, that is the call, the challenge. What programs are we running on? Why are we running towards the things or away from the things we're running towards or away from? I think it's assimilation and integration. We're here to understand all of it, own all of the aspects, and embrace the darkness within us. Turn around and face our demons. Embrace it. Brace it, bring it in, because it's embracing you anyway. It can come up from behind and squeeze you all the time, or you can turn, you can face it, and you can breathe it in and release it. It's responsibility too is here. I think what we're calling for as well. Bruce Lee said, "You're not responsible for the feelings that you have. You are responsible, however, for acting on them, or how you act or react to them." And we're made up of all these diverse energies. It's too convenient to say it's bad to be judgmental. Judgment forms an important aspect of life and understanding through discernment, to say being judgmental is bad, but obviously we can see where being judgmental and arrogant and quick to assume, make an ass out of you and me, and to project these labels can be a wholly detrimental thing for ourselves and for others in our lives as well. It's the responsibility. We are made up. We are made up of and contain a multitude of energies, and we're not necessarily we're not responsible for that. We're not responsible for what thoughts that we have. You're not a bad person for thinking sick thoughts. You are responsible for acting on them.
Yes, I agree, man.
For feeding them.
I agree, and I like to say responsible, respond able. Are you able to respond to the realization that you have capacity for ultimate destruction, as well as the capacity for ultimate creation? You contain within you those energies, and so we could say that it's demons, or we could say that it's the devil, or we could say that it's angels, or we could say that it's God, or anything in between, any other kind of entity that we could put in that place. We could lay the responsibility at their feet, but that's not the way I understand it. The way I understand it is that it's our choice. And to go back to the law of one material, how you got to the law of one was through two paths: the illusion of duality, the illusion of separateness. It was either service to self or service to others. Both paths led you back to the source. One, however, would create a much more, how do we say, shitty existence. Let's just be real. Where the other would be a much more harmonious and balanced way of getting back to source. But both paths led you there. So one could argue that a follower of the Satanic Order, which their creed is "do what thou will," okay, and basically the more perverse, the more profane, and that is something that if you really want to expand on the understanding of where Satanism's roots are in all of these dark occult things that are called, and occult only means hidden, but if you really want to expand on that, I highly recommend Robert Sepher's material, Sepher. He has a YouTube channel and he's written a couple of books. The guy is fantastic because he is showing you in the words of the ancient texts, of a lot of ancient texts that you had no idea existed, but where these things come from, where all of the nuance in the religious arena really stems from. And it becomes very clear that there were priests. There was somebody afoot. I'm not going to label it a conspiracy, because God knows that there's enough tinfoil hat shit that we have to overcome or, you know, evade the label of. It wasn't, I wouldn't say a grand conspiracy in that sense, but it's very clear that man had a hand in giving us this thing that we call religion. And it definitely was not to uplift God or to make us more connected to our Father or our Mother Earth either. If anything, I think it was to confuse that. And that's why we now are living in a time where everything is so obviously turned upside down, where it's so obvious that, what's being presented as truth is pure fiction, like bad theater. Okay. And so but the purpose isn't to trick you. The purpose is to get you to accept lies and do nothing, to not be able to respond. Again, that lack of responsibility. What can I do? I'm just one guy. Well, I voted. Or, oh, my guy didn't get in. Or, oh, Jesus is coming back to save us anyway. Or the devil's going to take over the earth. Or whatever other outsourcing of your power you want to put in play. Instead of just saying, shit, man, what can I do? What can I do today? As the person I am right now, with the resources I have right now, what can I do to change my reality? You have so much power. So much power. If you didn't, why would the message constantly be disempowerment, disillusionment, division? Why are they constantly trying to trick you into believing that? And you can watch what these people are beaming out as facts or truth, and it's very clear to the vast majority of the population. And I think that's the other part of it too. They would like us to believe, or they lead on to believe, that it's like half of the population thinks one way and half of the population thinks another. That's not even remotely close to true. I get out and talk to people, and I know you do too. And yes, we do live in an area that is maybe more of an echo chamber. But I talk to people from all over the place, and people are not that black and white. That's not the world we live in. It's the gray in between. And the sooner we embrace that gray, the sooner that we embrace that which divides us is so much smaller and minuscule than that which actually unites us. Watch out, man. Watch out. There will be mad changes. And that's why, to me, the true path forward lies in some decentralized format, whether it's decentralized currency, decentralized government, decentralized forms of, for lack of a better term, worship, decentralized ways of organizing or protesting, because humans don't agree in groups. It didn't ever happen. This country was founded upon people. When the Mayflower sailed over here and the Puritans got off, you know what the first thing they established? They established a damn dystopian future if you were anything other than a Puritan. And you couldn't even live in their settlement of Jamestown if you didn't believe. And it's so hilarious, right? They left the king because the king wouldn't give them religious freedom, and they came here and they set up a dictatorship. They did nothing different than what they left. And so what did they get for results? They got a lot of suffering and a lot of pain and a lot of toil. And I got to believe that that's because they were so rigid in their BS that they couldn't possibly look outside of a very small box that they put on themselves, right? And so, rather than learn how to work with creation, they were trying to conquer it. They were constantly fighting it instead of embracing it and responding ably to, the different sets of circumstances. And so then they were victimized. And that's kind of where we are, right? We're at a place where people are either remaining victims, and they're coming up with all kinds of ways to victimize themselves, whether it's through their religious choices or their political choices, or hell, even their genetics. I mean, we would say, oh, well, I'm genetically predisposed to heart failure, so I'm going to die of a heart attack, and there's nothing I can do about that. Bullshit. There isn't any aspect of your physical being or your mental being or anything other that makes you up that is outside of your direct control. I will say that again. You have the ability to control every aspect of your being, and that includes your genes and your genetics. And guys like Bruce Lipton and guys, other individuals who are doing studies on things called epigenetics have proved definitively that this is the case. That we're not a slave to our genes.
What did Jesus say? I didn't heal you. Your faith healed you.
What is faith? Faith is belief, right? Faith is saying, I don't know the answer, man, so I'm gonna go with the feeling that this is true.
Live.
Right. Be live. Yes.
Be live.
Yeah. Well, so again, people can argue, we can get in, it's what it really boils down to is we're having semantic disagreements. And because we cling so desperately to these labels of who we think we are and who this me character in the game called life that's being played out within many other games, right? If we were able to just step out of those boxes for a moment and really look around the room and realize how ridiculous those boxes actually are and how constricting and minimizing they are, it becomes clear, man, that there is a time we must evolve or we will perish. That is true. That much to me is true.
That's right. That's right.
We
know we need, like as you spoke of decentralization, which very much makes sense to me as the way out, the way in, and the way through. Man, I don't want another revolution.
No.
To come back to this same point, I want an evolution, not revolution. I wish I had the receipts to show it. I didn't come prepared tonight with that either. It's beginning to seem more clear, and I think there are receipts or tangible proofs produced, if you will, of the Rothschilds even backing the Great American Experiment, a revolutionary war, funding both sides.
Absolutely, there are receipts.
The colonials and the British.
Yes, absolutely.
Here we are. Where even as it's so easy to understand why conservatives, why that would be so freaked out right now with this constant tear down, breakdown of everything, with no proposition of rebuilding either. But where I find disagreement, if you will, with the conservative mindset, this of conserving the Constitution is, and I know a lot of I'm just speaking generally here, of people thinking that this piece of paper grants rights, or that's where our rights come from, and if it weren't for this doctrine, we wouldn't have them. Where even in the document itself, what grants us rights?
Our Creator.
Say God. To step away from it, to zoom out from the religious aspect, creation, based on being here anyway, inalienable upon birth, and that's up for debate is typical and frightening too. That people, for whatever twisted reason, would want to debate that we need some sort of document to grant us rights. Well, okay. Well,
what does that say? I mean, what does that say about the limitations that we would impose upon ourselves, right? The refusal to step into our power and accept the ability to respond that goes along with being a co-creator of your reality. When you really embrace what it means to be a co-creator, and I'm not there. I'm not going to sit here and try and pretend that I'm living some perfect example.
And we wouldn't be here, That's but right. I know what you're saying. I know we have less figured out than we would like to within this time and place that we're at as well. Humbly approaching it and authentically. Yeah, no, I don't have it figured out either. And that was some of my apprehension of even presenting this subject. But maybe it's as cathartic for people as it is for me right now, because this shit we're doing right here is like therapy for me.
Oh, it is for
it
me
is
too,
service to self, and it's service to others if it helps other people. And this call for inclusion, which through seeming opposition or even pointing out the things that you might be repelled from, like looking for the in between. Does that make sense? It's this and this all the time, Or I don't think we would be here. I think we would have evolved past this place when we reached that point of perfection. However, it is the thing worth striving for, of being our best versions of our best selves. And some people don't want the responsibility of that. They don't want to put the work and the effort in, because it is work. It is effort. I mean, if you haven't before, try meditating. Okay? And then tell me that that's just some new age. Oh, it's easy, just laying there and breathing. Still, try it. And tell me it's not work.
Try defining it.
Doing nothing isn't doing something.
Yeah, try defining it, like put a label on what is proper meditation.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. I think, to me, successful meditation is letting my thoughts come in and flow out, and not dwelling on my thoughts, not engaging in that constant, never-ending voice that's just running on and saying all kinds of random things. Okay, and that's, if you wanted a small glimpse inside of my mind, like, it's rarely is it ever silent. Rarely. And if there is silence, then there's also a whisper, and no, it's not because I hear voices. It's the incessant judge or self, this self thing that, has just needs to be put in the back seat from time to time and told to, enjoy the ride instead of trying to drive or tell me how to get there. And that's I think, and I want to go back to the point that you made about revolution and the turning around, and there's a lot of talk out there in collective consciousness about this thing called the fourth turning. And it stems from a book that was written in the 90s called The Fourth Turning. And the concept of it, or those concepts anyway, were outlined in this book. And really what the book was like a sociological not an experiment, like a dive into history through the lens of sociology. And in doing that, he came to the conclusion that there was like 4 turnings that occurred roughly every 100 years. And where we are now is, there's been 4 turnings in the history of this nation, and every one of them ended in some major conflict or specific war on this continent. One being the Revolution, the second being the Civil War, and now where we are in this highly charged atmosphere where it seems like we're, at any day there could be some event that occurs that just sets it all off, right? And anyway, we're in this, you could look at the 4 turnings like 4 seasons. That's how I would choose to believe, to see them. But we can't change that we're in a turning event. It's already underway. What we can do is we can say we want to be the best versions of ourselves through the chaos that these types of events bring. And then when it comes back around to it, and we come back into the spring, from the winter, that the seeds that we plant will bloom into something that's worth experiencing, that's worth picking, right? It's some good fruit to reap the harvest of. And I think that's what we're doing right here and now. That's what people like Stephen, the model anarchist, or Brandon Joe Williams, or Aaron Abkey, or Jay Griff, or any number of fantastic content creators who are really just trying to share their own perspectives and add to the soup that is, this thing loosely referred to as this expanded consciousness. And, I'm trying to let spirit work through me, right? I'm trying, maybe for the first time in my whole life, to just let spirit guide me through wherever it is, and say the best thing. I even, before every one of these, I even say a little prayer, if you will, to myself, like, just help me find the right words. Help me say the thing that is honest and truthful, and will not create more division, because we don't need any more boxes to put ourselves in.
Yeah. Yeah. This is our call for us to take custodianship of who we really are and the stuff we're really made of, which is beautiful stuff and seemingly ugly stuff, that just creates this beautiful dance here. We don't have to act on the ugly stuff all the time. We don't have to act on the lovely stuff all the time. It is not all roses and rainbows here.
No, it is not.
And quote, poison, every rose has its thorn, right?
True, though. True. In a big hair kind of
And this is not a time for some sugar-coated shit. Let us not hide the more so off-putting parts of ourselves, of either out of fear of rejection or loss of connection or anything, because that would be fear running the program all the time.
No, I'll tell you, Clayton, like, in all honesty, I think that collectively we're coming to what I would call a near-death experience. And I don't know how that's all going to, and I don't say that I'm not trying to sound scary or whatever. I think that humanity came very close to completely blowing itself away again. And I think it's happened many times over in our evolution. And the more you dig into, if you read the Anastasia stuff, you're going to get a heavy dose of that. If you dig into other spiritual teachings, you're going to get a heavy dose of these same themes over and over again. Whether it's the Emerald Tablets or even the Kabbalion, or the Book of Enoch, any of these alternative texts, you're going to see this theme where humanity just plain went too far. And I think this time is different. We're not going to kill ourselves. We're not going to end in some weird dystopian AI future. That's what the powers that should not be, that's what they want us to believe. That's why they're constantly beaming in it. That's why they're playing a game of chess that, is maybe generations ahead of us in terms of moves.
Well, we're still over here playing checkers, playing their...
Well, that's why they're not hiding. At this point, they can't hide anymore, right? So they're using the power that they have, which is, the power of, it's magic, but it's imagery. Black magic. It's imagery. That's right.
Magic,
that's right.
Magician, imagery,
Exactly.
Magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they understand very well that we are all co-creators here. So they want us, if that is their end, more... It's more... the results are better delivered when people are creating this thing for themselves rather than trying to force it upon somebody. Because if we could feel the chains, if we could physically feel the chains, then we would want to buck against that immediately. But if you can't see the chains and you can't see the bars, that is a much more effective prison, When they introduced the coin and the trinket and took the shackles off and dangled that carrot, that was a much more effective motivator that was less likely to lead to revolt,
Yes.
The thing is, we're evolving into deeper feeling beings who we can feel the weight of the shackles now, those energetic shackles, as almost tangible and physical within us and our beings when we look around, and we're bucking back, and I think about that bucking back. I was thinking about that last night too, of I don't want to push against the forces of oppression. I think of your jujitsu analogies a lot too. Like, if they push, we pull.
Right.
Let's dance here. Be quick on your feet. This is not a time to be rigid in ourselves and our belief structures. We have to be fluid.
Yeah, never static.
Never static. Never static, but back and forth, like a surfer, whose feet definitely are not firmly planted. We use the word firmly planted, like grounding. No, loosely moving, rocking back and forth, feeling the weights, but riding. But stay up, man. Like don't fall off. Or if we fall off, get back up.
That's right.
Sometimes we need to chill and take a breath. That's cool. Sometimes maybe that's what depression is, or to be depressed maybe is taking a deep rest. One of my dear friends of mine says it's okay to go to those dark corners of ourselves and of our souls. Just don't unpack all your stuff.
That's a good way to say it.
You're just waiting at the station, and that's okay. And it's okay to feel lost. It's okay not to have an answer for who am I. I'd almost be a little suspicious of somebody. I am suspicious of when people who I know exactly why I am, and I know exactly why I'm here. Well, brother, sister, I know exactly what you mean, because in a higher sense, I know why I'm here too, and I know my proclivities and the things that I like and the things that give me meaning. But I don't know what I'm doing. No, I don't know exactly why I'm here. But I'm here, and I'm going to keep showing up.
Well, I'm going to say it because it's had such an impact on my life, really, and that is jujitsu. That is the thing that is jujitsu, and I bring it up because it continues to blow me away at how the creators of martial arts fully understood these principles that we're talking about, and the practice of the art was a representation of what is in nature. The push pull aspect of jujitsu, the timing of things, like you said, there's times where you take a rest, and oftentimes though those rest periods are when you're getting crushed and you're like, gosh, I don't want to be here. This is a sucky position. This big smelly guy. I don't want to be here anymore. But I can't just get away because there's all of these restrictions that are on me. But if I time it just right and I just move a little bit and I think before I react, then when I put all of that together, not only can I escape, but then I get into a place where I'm more in control. But don't worry, you won't stay in control long if your player is equally as good as you are, because they're going to reverse what you just did on you. And the point of bringing it up and mentioning it is that I think it's really important for all of us to find things in life that reinforce what I would say is that line that is capital T truth. And for me, jujitsu is one of those things. And I had no idea when I started it that it would become almost another aspect of spirituality. And I'm not saying that from like some weird I worship jiu-jitsu place. That's not it. It's more of a conceptual understanding and of like a series of aha moments that I had while continuing to show up. While, like in a lot of aspects when I would go to it or do it, it was like, oh God, this sucks. This is not fun. Why am I doing this? But I would keep showing up. And then it not only did it become fun, but then it was like, whoa, I can play this game, and I don't know. It's a metaphor for life, man. It really is. And I think there are a lot of different things in life that is, that's true. That's true. And I'm sure as a musician, you can see that it's true in, musical scale or learning to play any instrument.
Performing in front of people, it is very much the same as anything in life. Like some nights, beautiful. You have those matrix moments where you feel like Neo dodging bullets and splitting agents apart, and it all makes sense, and you constantly want to be operating from that state, you know. And I'm understanding more and more along this journey that you're not always going to be in that state, you know. There's nights where you feel like you're stuck. Well, I should just hang it up. And then you read these articles about the futility of trying to make a living playing music, or you wonder, why should I be doing this anyway? And I think that level of self-doubt is healthy too. It's all in flux, you know, but you keep showing up. Like, so many people expect to be good at everything right out of the gate without putting the time in, you know. And then when we look at people who have levels of mastery, lots of people, they remove their power by saying, oh, they're so talented. How are you so talented? You must be gifted. No,
Right.
I practiced, you know.
Right.
I wish I could do that. Well, you practice, you know.
Yeah.
And people, and when you achieve a level of mastery, we have the assumptions that we again, that you're just, that being a master is being perfect and not being fallible. You're a spiritual person. You must not make mistakes. You must not swear. You must eat really well all the time. You know what I mean? Always say exactly what you mean. Not offend people. You don't get hurt. You know, just unrealistic expectations. And yeah. So anyway, the exploration of a practice, of a sport, of a hobby, all these they are just greater expressions of the same thing, just existence, what it means to be here, you know. While a lot of people bring back the meditation concept again, just shut down very well. I can't meditate. Meditation is not for me. Like, I've been trying this for a year. I can't quiet my thoughts. You know, man, I've been meditating for 15 years, pretty damn regularly and irregularly. You know, and it's like, I just quiet my thoughts all the time. Like, this is easy. You know, this life thing is not easy, nor should it necessarily be easy, you know. But to keep showing up, you know, I know that's what I want to hammer into, is like how wow, we really have branched off here from duality and dogma to this place of what, hopefully this is where the help comes in. And this is my call for people: keep showing up to your life, be present in your worst days. Like, don't quit. That doesn't mean that you don't necessarily call in or take what we're calling a mental health day. Like, that's cool too. Spend a day, spend a week if you have to. But man, don't exit yourself, if you know what I mean. Keep showing up.
Yes. And that it's not really a divergence from duality, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not, like I said in the beginning, it's not as simple as black and white. You know, we're talking about all of the stuff in between, which is really one and the same. And there's all these things that happen to us that, you know, send you down, that create that wave, you know, the riding, the up and the down. But that is also part of life, is the seasons. And that's something that you hit on, is, you know, like, it isn't always going to be the line that is truth. It's a ride, whether it's tides or seasons or, you know, different time experiences within your life. You know, they're if you align what you're doing with that idea that there are seasons, and that change is really the only universal constant, then you will be ready for this decentralized future that could be, right? And I really do believe, you know, so like, I don't think we really got off into too dark or depressing, you know, area, honestly. I am continually optimistic. And even when I go off on the news cycle from time to time, if I get hung up in the news du jour, I still come out of it going, you know what, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay.
No.
It's not,
Because
but it
we
isn't going to be
understand
pretty.
we're co-creators, and we're choosing that mindset, you know, even though we want to be, as I know, like for me, like a person who's operant, whose MO is not, you know, a life of fear. Like, I get scared too, y'all. And if you don't get scared, I don't think you're being truthful. I don't think you're honest. I don't think you're looking around at the world. Like, it's scary. It seems bleak sometimes. Like,
Yes.
that's okay. Own that, you know.
Yep.
But choose to show up. Choose your perspective. and recognize that it is a choice. Our perspectives are a choice. They're not necessarily capital T truth. It's too convenient of a dogma, you know, that the way that I'm feeling today is the way that the world really is, you know, like, no, you might be having a bad day. I might be having a great day.
Right.
Or the opposite, you know.
Right.
Where I'm at right now, it's fucking hot as balls, dude. It's uncomfortable.
It's terrible.
But man, it's beautiful.
Yes.
It's a beautiful life of contrast. I wouldn't want it all just peachy keen all the time. Where would the growth be? You know?
Well, it is the perfect.
Be around nice people all the time. I don't want to be around mean people. I don't want to be around mean people, you know, but I want to be around nice people all the time.
Right.
Nice is fake, you know?
That's right.
Nice guys are dangerous, you know. We've seen what nice guys in office do, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, shoot, man. I don't know how much further would you like to expand on this particular topic, or I mean, there's really hours and hours of content you could make on differing, aspects of this.
No, yeah, I think this is a good place to wrap things up. I hope, again, as I've said many times with this show, I hope it's cathartic for y'all as it is for us, because this is I carry this with me day to day. You know, it makes me want to be a better version of myself. Remember the things that I discussed, you know, and when I find myself in situations, it's like, is this the way I'm going to go? You know, when I claim to live this way, you know, does that make sense? So I just really hope, that's my big hope, is that this is helpful for people, you know. If I'm not really so concerned with if it's entertaining, you know, there's enough entertainment out there, you know. But
So
even
true.
if it is entertainment, I'd rather, like, me for myself, I'm trying to center even my scrolling to be like stuff like this, even if I'm vegging out to stuff that at least some conscious content, rather, you know.
Yes.
Because what we're saying is not this earth shattering or by any means new. And there are plenty of other platforms and podcasts saying what we're saying. There's nothing special about it other than just the unique perspective of what we are, you know. And this is our humble beginnings in this thing. Again, the production is kind of campy, but the content is gold. This is the real stuff, you know. It's not superfluous.
Superfluous.
Yeah. You know, and it doesn't always have to go so deep. I think we've got a lot of subjects in mind, from like things like the creative process. That's why I want to leave our viewers and listeners asking, please hit that subscribe button. You know, sure, you're tired of YouTubers telling you to do that, but please, man.
Yeah, well, it really does help. And now that I understand how these algorithms work, you know, like the more that you like and subscribe and share or comment on these things, the more we get put out into the algorithm. So, you know, the Brandon episode is over 1,100 views now. That's awesome.
Is it?
Yeah. So, you know, like that's really helped generate more traffic with the channel. And, you know, like you said, Clayton, I'm doing this, man, for very selfish reasons. You know, speaking for myself, I'm doing this because it allows me to make a public record, or maybe even something that I share with my children, you know, about who the fuck am I? You know, like, who is this guy that you call dad? And my kids are always saying, it's like, man, every now and then I'll hear a story and it's like, gosh, who were you? You were like so different than like what I picture you now. And I was like, well, I kind of lived a few lifetimes before you came, you know? And so that's what this is for me. And if it resonates with people, then that's beautiful. If it changes or helps one person, then I'm successful in serving others. And that's enough for me. You know, so I'm not really attached to how many people like us or subscribe us, but we do want this message to be shared, and we want people who are feeling hopeless or depressed to maybe feel something other than, and to know that you're not alone. I know for you and me both, this journey has been a very long and painful and lonely walk, and I am so fortunate that I have you as a brother and my wife being, really lockstep with me, because so few people have that in partners, where their partner and them are on the same page, or at least willing to allow each other to go through this discovery process. And I am so abundant in that, and I'm grateful. I'm very grateful for it.
Me too, man. I'm very grateful. And yeah, so asking with what I was getting to with the like and subscribe to is like in the comments section, we're asking people, we want to hear what topics people would like us to touch upon. We may and we may not, and we already have interviews on the calendar. There will be interviews and there will be podcasts again, I'm sure, where it's the two of us or the three of us, are you and Jake, and
Sure.
it's bound to be sometimes too where maybe just Jeremy,
Maybe.
for some of them too, maybe, but yeah, what I'm getting to is we want to know what makes them tick. I think, or I want to know.
I do. I would love to know what people are, like, what are they wrestling with? What are you in your life? What would you love to expand upon or get involved in? And maybe moving forward, we could start doing lives where we can actually bring people on. Like, I'm open to just about anything that, gets people more involved and integrated, because these kinds of discussions are what's going to lead us away from the darkness and into the potential future that we see. This decentralized place where people are allowed to be who they are and they embrace their uniqueness and their specific purpose, and that's what they bring to the world. And instead of being a cog in a machine, driving current to a very small point at the top of a pyramid or the bottom of the pyramid, depending upon which way it's going, right? And so, anyway, that's my spiel. And
man, this was for me. This was in the spirit of duality. This was a good one. Let's use that word good. I'm trying to think of better words. This was a good one. This was a God one. This was a big one. This has been a pleasure. Thank you all for your viewership and for your time, space, understanding, and effort to understand what's going on here within us and without us. And I'm so grateful for everything that I have and all that is to come. And I hope that you all are too. Peace, love, and wholeness. That's it from my end for the evening.
All right. Well, I love you all. And with that, we are signing off.